One of the very best things about this hobby is the community that you can get involved in. One of the very worst parts of this hobby is the community that you can get involved in. The worst part of this are the gatekeepers, the people who go out of their way to make you feel like crap so that they can maintain their hierarchy. I'm going to give you some signs, some phrases that you can use as warnings to say this is perhaps someone I want to block, moderate, ignore, or just discount. Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watchers. I'm Pete McConville. The only benefit of being old is experience. I've been involved in online forums, whether those are chat rooms, message boards, Facebook forums, Instagram comment threads, pretty much since any of those things existed. And I've been involved in them on a huge variety of topics, whether it's tabletop wargaming with miniatures, or yes, I am a geek and a nerd. Whether it's politics, whether it's cameras and photography, whether it's cars, you name it, I've been involved in that kind of nerdy hobby and environment. And now, more recently, over the last couple of years, I've been involved in the watch area. And there are some common traits. And the single most common toxic person in any of those communities is the gatekeeper. The person who's decided what's in, what's out, what's cool, what's not, what's worthy, what's unworthy. And that matches up generally with their own prejudices, their own, I won't even say ideas because there's rarely a great deal of thought in it, but their own biases. And it took me a little while to sort of figure out what the gatekeeping tactics were in the watch community. I know what they were, particularly in the photography online community, because that's a particularly toxic place. It took me a little while to figure out what the key words and phrases, what to look for in the watch community to realize you're being gatekeeped. What I want to do is run through what I think are the signs that you're dealing with a gatekeeper, and that these are the things you don't necessarily want to exclude someone for raising, because some of these are legitimate topics. They are legitimate things to talk about. But they're things that you need to, if someone starts talking about these things, if someone starts doing these things, you need to be very careful and listen for the sneer. Listen for the status keeping. Listen for the peacocking. Listen to see what are they really trying to achieve if they do any of these things. With the exception of one. One of these is an instant red card, and I'll start with that. Okay, the instant red card, and it doesn't matter what the forum is, it doesn't matter what the topic is the counter. That is the person who counts comments or counts inputs or counts time of how long they've been there, or counts watches and how many watches or how many cars or how many cameras or how many photos or how many trips or how many countries, and then uses that count as a weapon against you. You know, the person who says, you've only done 3 comments, who are you to say? That sort of person, if someone does that to you, immediately block them. Immediately ignore them, immediately do whatever you can to never interact with that person online again. They are a fundamentally toxic person, and nothing that comes next is actually worth listening to, because everything that comes next is about them establishing and maintaining that status. So that is a cardinal rule. That is a graven in stone commandment for me. The instant someone mentions how many comments or how long or how much or how few, that's it, they're out. And I would suggest you follow the same rule. Everything that comes next is a yellow card. As I said, doesn't necessarily exclude them, but if they raise any of these topics, be cautious about what comes next. Okay, so the first is anyone who spends an enormous amount of time and energy trying to define luxury. So someone who says that a luxury watch costs more than this, or comes from this sort of shop, or is bought this way, that's an interesting discussion and it's fun to play with. But if someone starts getting really specific, bad sign, they're trying to gatekeep you. Okay, the next one is similar, very similar. Again, it's people who try and define hierarchies. Tissot is here, and Rado is here, and Omega is here, and Longines is here, and Rolex is here, and this brand is here. And that's, again, fun game to play, and if it's being done in the right spirit, fine, let it go on. But if people start getting really antsy about it and kind of really strident, again, they're a gatekeeper. What comes next is going to be toxic. Just bail out. Okay, the next one is the word shitter. The word shitter doesn't really, a shitter watch doesn't really have a definition. It kind of morphs as it moves around the web. But the common thread is it's a word used to use very social justice warrior language, it's a word used to other something, to declare it as being outside the acceptable. People will even say it about their own watches. I own this Invicta, but it's just my shitter. And the reason they're saying that is to distance themselves from it and to say, yes, look, I own it, but I own it ironically. I own it. It doesn't reflect who I am. I know it's a bad watch. I know it's something that I shouldn't like. It's like guilty pleasure. It's, again, look, if in the right circumstances, if people are having fun and messing around with it, no harm, no foul. But when people start taking that word too seriously, when people start getting into it a bit too much, again, toxic person, gatekeeper, step away, not worth listening to. Okay, so the next warning sign that you're dealing with a gatekeeper is the word homage. Now, homage can be used perfectly legitimately. It is absolutely legitimate and correct to say that the most recent releases of Rolex, the new Submariners, are a homage to the many generations of Rolex that have come before them, because that is absolutely what they are. Rolex has worked very hard to make sure that the new releases pay respects to that long line of very, very important watches. It is right that the newest Submariners pay respect to that long line, and that word, the correct use of homage, is exactly that. Likewise, you might say that the Breitling Navitimer 806 reissue is a homage to the earlier versions that were released in the 1950s and 60s. Again, absolutely true. They have been respectful of the history of that watch. They have been very careful in how to bring it forward and reintroduce it today. If someone's using the word homage that way, no problems. That's an absolute legitimate and the correct way to do it. When you get the idiocy of people saying that any watch with a stainless steel bezel is somehow a homage to a Rolex Explorer, again, you're being gatekept. That person isn't really using that word in good faith. What they're doing is they're weaponizing the word as a way to, for example, in that particular case, keep Grand Seiko in their place and make it very clear to you that Grand Seiko fits somewhere below Rolex because, Rolex once used a stainless steel bezel over here, and since Grand Seiko have done the same thing, this is clearly a knockoff of that, therefore they're in different status groups. If people are starting to use the word homage in that way, again, you're dealing with a gatekeeper, just bugger off, don't deal with them anymore. Next sign is the use of resale value as a way of establishing the worth of a watch. And that is to say, one watch is demonstrably better than another watch because this watch has better or worse resale value. Garbage analysis makes zero sense, says nothing about the inherent value of the watch, and is almost exclusively used as a way of establishing a pecking order, establishing a status which aligns with the prejudices of the speaker. So again, if you're having a discussion about which watch to buy from a resale point of view because you are thinking you are going to flip, then in that case resale makes perfect sense. That's a legitimate discussion to have. But when you get that reflexive, don't buy that watch, it has crap resale, and you haven't even started in this discussion of I might want to flip it later, again, you're being gatekept, and someone is trying to establish a hierarchy to establish what watch you should think about, whether you like it or not. The next one is the odious comparison. So that is the person who takes a watch which might cost $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and then they will compare it to watches that cost $1,000 or $2,000, and they'll say, I believe this watch up here at this price range should really only be compared to these watches down here, and they won't ever even try and compare it to watches like at the same price or market level. What they're trying to do is drag it down and tell you that this watch isn't worthy of your consideration, isn't worthy of our consideration. It's an out watch. When people start making those comparisons, those massive, as I said, the odious comparisons between totally different market segments, they're just trying to reinforce a hierarchy and a status level inside their own heads. And again, toxic for you, step away. Okay, and now this last one is a terrible thing to do. No one should ever do it, but gatekeepers do it a lot, and that is just casual racism and casual sexism. So without even thinking, they'll blow a watch away because they'll, with something like, I'm sure it's popular in the Asian community, or I'm sure this is popular with women, or I think that this is probably designed to be appealing to some, marginal or diverse group. As soon as someone says any of those words, just move on. So like I said, these things are not all instant red cards. If you're in a community and you know people and you're joshing around and you're having some fun and you're being ironic or whatever, great. Ignore everything I said except the counter. They are always bad news and kick them out. But what do you think? Do you think I'm being harsh? Do you think that it's legitimate to use these sorts of tools to establish hierarchies and status and keep people and watches in their place? Hint, I don't think that can be made in good faith, but I'll give you you can have a red hot go in the comments below. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. I'll see you later. Bye.